Welcome to the perfect way of ruining your running. This is episode 4 of Born to Run, The Naked Truth, a podcast dedicated to examining all the theories, conjectures, and ideas I propose in Born to Run. Today, we're with Callie Vinson and Mika McDougall, who both have unique dietary challenges which affect their running. But in their challenges, we see a path forward for everybody, because what they learned is if you don't dial in your eating, you will always be risking disaster with your running. Enjoy episode 4, Born to Run, The Naked Truth. Good. So, what's up, crazy? So, what were you doing?
Running the Moab 240.
And that was your longest run by a multiple of what?
Before that, I did a run on my own that was about 135. I've kind of been guesstimating, and I did that on my own for Strava Art. So this was my longest run by over 100 miles.
I'm kind of dumbfounded by you for a lot of reasons, but let me just start by the way I came across you in the first place. I saw an Instagram photo of you sliding through this narrow stone passage with your kind of arm out and this really cool tattoo and this big smile on your face. And then I read the caption, and I think you referenced the fact that you had basically lost like 2/3 of your body weight. And now you were this like super fit adventure gal. And I just wanted to know more. And you ended up being in Born to Run too. So can you start off with a thumbnail of your journey?
Yeah, I can give you a little quick description. I grew up in Orlando, Florida. I always loved sports growing up. I was big into soccer, and eventually in high school, I got into rowing, and I actually almost went to Berkeley to be on the rowing team. But last minute, I took hard right turn and went to Savannah to be in art school. And so in art school, that's where I just completely fell off the rails. I lost touch with being active in sports and got into very, very unhealthy habits of drinking and eating whatever, and 3 fast food meals a day, maybe more. And I just kind of like fell into this deep, dark hole of this very unhealthy eating style and eating disorders. And it wasn't until I went to Chicago, where I started my career, one day, like very new into Chicago. One of my friends asked to go to brunch, and I looked up the place because, of course, I was going to look up the menu to see what I wanted. And they were like, we're going to walk there. So I looked up where it was, and it was a mile away. And I was like, I can't walk a mile to go to brunch. That's insane. I would die along the way. And that was kind of the big red flag for me, and that I needed to start making changes. I've always wanted to be this person who had, these big dreams of like doing all this outdoorsy stuff and going up the ladder in my career. I work in advertising, and I had all these other just big dreams and goals that I wanted to do. And I just was starting to realize that I would be limited in what I could do or what I wanted to do. And I didn't want to live this limited life for myself. And of course, doctors, before then had told me, like, if you continue on this journey, you're going to be staring at an early death. And that was also surprisingly not as big as a red flag as not being able to walk to brunch, but that was a red flag too. But I started just making these small, tiny little changes. The first one was making my lunch every day. I've always loved cooking. I just always made very, very bad things, but I love dabbling in the kitchen. So I started learning how to cook like the right stuff that I should be eating. And I started making my lunches. It took about 2 weeks or so before that became a habit. I joined a gym because that's, I hear, what the people do. And started working out, and then eventually got the courage to go for a run around the block. And I was so scared. I did it early in the morning, I think, before people had woken up, and it was still dark out, so no one could see my running form or lack thereof. Salmon's ready. And I started running a little bit more. And I got an injury because I had no idea what I was doing, and I was adding too many miles too soon for my weight, especially. But I let that heal, and I picked it back up again, because I always told myself, like, this thing running, which I've always hated. I mean, that's why I became a rower, is because it required the least amount of running to do, because you're in a boat. If I could conquer this thing called running, I felt like I could conquer anything. I could conquer any of these goals that I wanted to achieve. And I, went out and did all these runs by myself. I never joined a group run because I was too terrified to run with people. And so one day I went out and did 13.1 miles on my own. I was like, I did a half marathon or whatever this is. And I think it was shortly after that I was standing on the train platform, and the Red Eye is the newspaper in Chicago. Like it was a week before the Chicago Marathon. So of course the front cover was for Chicago. And I saw that and I was like, oh, man, there's no way I could ever run a marathon. But with that thought came, I have to run a marathon. So I found a group that I could get an entry to Chicago with. It was the Pause Chicago. They're a no-kill animal shelter, and they have a running team called Team Pause. So I joined them in 2016. I ran my first marathon. My first race was the Chicago Marathon. And from there, it was all downhill. I signed up for a 50 miler, and then I got into a 100 miler, and here I am 10 days after a 240 miler.
So, what really caught my attention when you and I first spoke was I always had this idea that the perfect way to ruin your running is by going on this constant pursuit of calories, that you're basically running, trying to catch up with whatever food you ate previously. And you're on this constant vicious downward cycle of like, oh, I ate too much, I better run, I better run more, I better keep running. And you're calculating your distance by your calories. What I love about the approach that you and Mika also took was that your first goal was to dial in your eating first. It was almost like to take the food out of the equation. So that was one reason I was intrigued to talk to you. And secondly, and the reason why I wanted you and Mika to get together is because you both have genetic predispositions to food-related problems. Because being Native American, you are prone to diabetes and obesity, and Mika also for her heritage. So I guess I just want to put the question to you first, Callie, was how did you know that step one was to come up with a systematic eating plan before you plunged into the insane world of ultra running?
I'm curious about that myself. Why did I choose that? I think because choosing a small goal sounded more, I guess, reasonable. At the time, I was so busy working in advertising, especially I think at the time I was a junior. So you're just hungry for more hours. Like I just want to work all the time, and working in an ad agency, I mean, they'll let you work all the time. So, I mean, there would be times where I'd be working, 70, 80 hours a week, wouldn't leave the office. And so the idea of making a change just sounds so daunting. And I think knowing that I just love to cook and I love dabbling with food, that sounded like the most, I guess, easiest thing I could implement into my day-to-day routine. And something that I would potentially enjoy doing too, cooking and learning how to cook something. And then I think because I liked to cook and I like to explore food, learning about food became this very interesting thing to me, like learning the value of putting broccoli in my body versus French fries. I was like, oh, like this food has kind of a superpower versus this other food. So I felt like eating all these things gave me all these little superpowers towards my health. And I think maybe that became my inspiration to keep wanting to learn more about healthier food versus going and getting McDonald's for dinner.
I love the fact that your superpower was learning, that it wasn't about logging more miles, it wasn't about logging more pounds lost. It was about learning. That's what got you interested. You were going to master this craft. And by mastery, then you would get the results. Mika, why don't you talk about your own entry to running, because you're not a runner by background, and you had to kind of invent your own way into it.
Well, I've been running, I would say, I started in high school on the school track team, and that did not last long because they were telling me to do the heel striking. I got shin splints. That didn't last long. Then, in college, I had a boyfriend who ran a lot, and I was trying to stay in shape and started that. And then eventually was trying to balance my, what I can eat with what I can run, and so I can still look good in my bikini in Hawaii. And so, but I've never been able to or wanted to run really long distances. I just don't have that desire in me, but I have been able to keep the distances short and consistent. But what I've found recently is that this weird thing of like, oh, people say you're so fit, you look so fit, but maybe that's so, but I have a lot of health issues that most people don't know about, that I have had to really hone in my eating in order to keep running. Now it's kind of turned into that. Being pre-diabetic and high cholesterol and high blood pressure, in order now for me to keep running and enjoying it, it has to start with the eating.
Yeah. So what was your strategy?
You know, I did not know that I had these problems, and it just happened to be that I went to a good doctor who was able to see the problems ahead of the downfall. And so we've been working together to really kind of head things off before I fall off the cliff. If I had not gone to the right doctor, I would still be doing all the wrong things with my eating. Maybe still running, but I don't think I would have much time.
What do you
So
mean by,
luck, I feel like it was luck.
yeah. What do you mean you wouldn't have much time? You mean time on the planet?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Am I making the conversation go downhill? But that's what I think.
Callie said the same thing. Your warning cry was, hey, I know something, I may be walking toward an early death. In some ways, Callie, you got a red flag just by the fact of the weight gain, that there was a visible warning to you that, hey, I better correct course. With Mika, it was different. She didn't have the visible warning because she's a dancer. She looked like she was in shape, but there were things happening within her body that were dangerous. Have you addressed that yourself, Callie? Have you looked at the fact that you actually had other danger signs potentially in your system that needed to be eradicated? Really, weight loss or running wasn't the problem. It was what the food was doing to your body that was more of an issue.
Well, I think also too, growing up, as a kid, I always had high cholesterol and I always had high blood pressure. And I knew that heart disease also ran in my family, and also a string of other things. But I knew maybe in the back of my mind that if I continued with this lifestyle, that was going to come back. For some reason, in my adult age, cholesterol was never as high as it was when I was younger, but I knew that the more I kept up with this lifestyle, the less my body would have the strength to keep fighting it. And it was probably bound to come back. So I think that was always something that was in the back of my mind that would motivate me. But the initial get-go was that not being able to walk to brunch and that limitation.
I think the real danger zone for a lot of people is that they may have risks that they're not aware of. In your case, you got a visual warning. In Mika's case, she had a heads up doctor that did the right tests. But I think the mistake a lot of people make is if they're doing enough miles, they're keeping everything in balance and they're good. But there's the famous case of Jim Fixx, who was the face of recreational running back in the 1970s until he, clutches his chest and dies of a sudden heart attack. In our own case, our friend Mika Caballo Blanco, this guy was, logging 30, 40-mile runs without a blink. And then suddenly, for a mysterious reason, his heart also gave out. You think about it, I think most people feel is that running is the Band-Aid or the antidote that will cover for a lot of sins. But we really strongly believe that you need to dial in your eating first, get a good handle on your heart health and cardiovascular health. And then running becomes a complement to that. So I like to go through a couple of diet approach strategies. So like Mika, in the first place, what was your way of creating an eating plan which would help benefit your running? as opposed to stop it?
It's a constant experiment. I'm still figuring it out. I don't know. But what really has been helpful is these glucose monitors. I've used both a continuous glucose monitor that it attaches to your skin and can check your blood whenever you want. And then I also have the one where you prick the finger. And I've been working really hard this week at making my fasting numbers first thing in the morning be low and not too high. And then tailoring my food so I can test it right before I eat and test again a couple hours after I eat and monitor what I'm eating to see if it boosts my sugars too high or keep it kind of in this like medium zone. So that's a constant puzzle for me, but I'm doing good this week.
Yeah, but it's something you keep an eye on. Callie, are you aware of your blood sugars? Do you track anything?
I don't track it very often. I am partnered with Inside Tracker, so we'll do blood work every 3 months. So that's how often I check my levels. But yeah.
Tell me about your work with the Inside Tracker. I met Jonathan Levitt at November Projects years ago, and we've been buds since then. And I have a kind of a distant knowledge of what they do. Eric, are you up to speed on the Inside Tracker?
Yeah, I've never used it, but I'm pretty up to speed on what they do and what the outcomes are. And I've had several athletes kind of do it. So yeah.
Callie, what was your experience?
So I've done my first blood work test, and I mean, it was awesome. It was very easy. Set up the appointment. You go to whatever lab is in your town closest to home. They send it to Inside Tracker, the results, and then you work with a registered dietitian on how to, take next steps into fixing and evening out levels. I knew I always had low iron and low ferritin levels, and of course that came back low, but I actually didn't know that I had low white blood cell counts. And so actually I had a doctor's appointment this morning to discuss that and discuss next steps. So that's something that we're figuring out, but it was very easy to understand as far as the results that you got back from Inside Tracker. And the way that they talked, or the dietitian talked about it with me, I was clearly able to grasp what my next steps are and what those next steps mean to fixing those levels. Like for instance, low iron, I know I'm eating a lot of seafood, hence the salmon in the oven, a lot of mussels, and also fortified cereal, which I didn't realize has a ton of iron in it. So I've been eating my Cheerios every morning now.
What point did you start to use Inside Tracker with your whole transformation?
Just recently. My first blood work was done in August. So my next one will be in like 3 or so weeks. So, I mean, so far, all amazing. I'm excited to see what the next results say.
Mika, what were you going to ask about Inside Tracker?
I think I'm the only one unfamiliar with Inside Tracker, but just a quick thing, can anyone do this? You don't need a doctor's referral, because my problem with the glucose thing, I had to really kind of fight for that glucose monitor. My doctor, I suppose maybe in past situations, it's kind of made people feel like they couldn't control their sugars, and then they just like, never mind, forget this, it's not working. But I knew that in my case it would be good for me, but it took a year for my doctor to finally write that prescription for me. So I'm curious.
Yeah, it's something that you just go on their website and you select which like level of testing you want done, and you order that, and you can either have the tests done at home, or you can go to like a mobile lab, or you can go to like a lab that's in a building, and they'll have your lab order ready, and they'll send it to Inside Tracker, the results, and then Inside Tracker will reach out to you to talk through those results. So it's nothing with a doctor, it's just purely like biomarker testing.
Why did you want to, get that kind of extra data?
I mean, kind of like the name of the company, like I want to know what was going on inside. Like, I mean, there's so much you can tell from, how you feel about your body and things that you eat and how you react to it. But I was curious if there was something like deeper going on. Because I've had stomach issues for a while now, but it's something that we're still trying to figure out. So I was wondering maybe something from Inside Tracker would give me some more results, but who knows, maybe. But I everything else seemed good, surprisingly good. Like all of my levels, some things I thought would be low, like CK levels, I thought that was going to be low. Turns out great. But yeah, it's interesting to see what could possibly come back. And I think that idea of like the possibilities of something being good or very off was very intriguing to me.
So I think this is super fascinating. A lot of what we're coming across with Born to Run 2 is learning to understand how your body feels, whether it's run form, the food you're ingesting, the running itself. And I think a lot of times when people make a change like you did and it go through a transformation, that they focus so much on maybe how much change they feel. But I would have to imagine that the transformation you made, from what I understand, took place in a very short period of time during that 2 weeks. And to me, that leads to it was more important about the confidence that gave you to keep going versus maybe how much you felt physically initially, but then physically you felt better through time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did lose the weight in a very short amount of time. And so I've kind of felt like since then till now, like my body's just been trying to like catch up, like almost trying to like recalibrate with this huge change that happened. And I've noticed in a couple of different ways, like how that's happening. Like sometimes, especially because of low iron, like when I stand up, I get really dizzy. It feels like I'm going through outer space because like I just have to like brace myself for a second. And my doctor said that could be because of the weight that you lost. Like your it was used to redistributing the blood in your body at a different level that it's happening now. And so your body's kind of catching up with the way that you're moving basically on a day-to-day basis. So it's been interesting and feeling those differences from, comparing back then to now.
We think that a lot of what we can do as athletes can be determined by dialing in our physical response, our understanding of how we feel, like Eric was saying. But what really opened my eyes to those hidden dangers came from my friend, Dr. Brene Bent, who's an ultramarathoner down in North Carolina. She's affiliated with Duke. And she published a study that indicates that an overwhelming majority of Americans today are pre-diabetic, that it is a rampant, deadly virus in our midst that goes undiagnosed and undetected. And she's the one that first told me about continuous glucose monitors, which led Mika on her battle with the medical establishment to get one for herself. And then there's a guy named Thosh Collins, who is a Native American wellness expert. When you see this guy is like chiseled from oak. He's like gorgeous, ripped, shredded, super athletic, but he regularly tests his A1C blood glucose levels every 3 months. Mm-hmm. And at first I was kind of shrugging that off like, he's kind of overreacting because look at this guy. But then I bought a test for myself and it sat on my desk for 2 weeks because I was afraid to take it. And I realized if you're afraid to take it, you're afraid for a reason, because secretly, there could be something there you don't want to look at. And I think this is the thing that we need to address as endurance athletes, is that what we feel might not be dialed in with exactly what's happening beneath the surface. So, you were talking about your own quest for getting your blood sugars under control. So tell me how that has sort of dialed in with your approach to running. How have you made running compatible with your eating and also just with your lifestyle?
You know, I was just thinking this morning when we were out on the beach today, and I was thinking, maybe it's a good thing that I know this stuff about the insides of my body, all the things that are deficient. It was nice living in that world of being oblivious to it, because I was still feeling good and having a good time and loving life. And now that I know this stuff, it doesn't feel as good emotionally, but I'm trying to look at it in a bigger picture and think that we're all going to have problems. If we solve one problem, another one's going to come up. It's kind of a never ending thing, whatever kind of problem it is, money, your children, whatever. But knowing about it is actually going to help me live a better life, even though I got to suffer with the emotions of it. In the end, it's really going to help me live a better life. And I have to really try to remember that. And so when I go on these runs, I try to make them about having fun. And these days, what I'm doing is I put on my earphones. I've been studying the Hawaiian language. And so the earphones, I listen to all these super old recordings of Hawaiians who are native speakers back from the 60s and 70s. And they're just talking story about their life back, during the territorial days of Hawaii and how it's changed and so forth. So it's fun to hear these stories. It's fun to try and learn Hawaiian. And I'm just using it as my study time. It's been a new thing for me. It's been good. So it keeps me wanting to run every day.
And Mika developed the most popular fun run technique we've ever had in the book and on our website, which was the free library run. She would load up her backpack with books in the house that she wanted to get rid of, and then she'd do like a running tour of all the little free libraries in the neighborhood. It would end up being like a 4-mile loop. You have little books built in, and you get that gratification of, hey, I'm cleaning my house while I run.
Then you grab more books, and then
but only as many as you can carry on your back, so you get a resistance workout. But now, so here's Callie. The reason I called you crazy at the beginning is I was actually afraid for you when I would see you taking on these massive challenges. I'm kind of like inside with Callie, hit the brakes, girlfriend. Like, slow down. Are you concerned? And Eric, maybe you should chime in on this too. When you see Callie going from, I can't walk a mile to the Waffle House to, I'm going to run 240 miles this weekend. I don't know, man. It seems excessive to me.
Oh man. Yeah. I love a good challenge. Like if there's that possibility of failure, I want to see how far I can get. And what was nice about, Moab is like, you could go at such a nice casual pace. And that's kind of what I did. I took it very easy. I knew from the beginning, like if I can't hold the pace that I'm doing in the beginning at the very end, then I should not be going that fast. So I made sure in the very beginning, you're going slow, you're going to be power hiking a lot, and just enjoy your time like you're in Moab. You get to explore the lowest parts of Moab, the high parts of Moab. We got up to 10,000 feet. So there were times where I would have to take like 20 steps and then, be breathing like a fish out of water, just like, because there's no air up there. But I also tried to just see the people around me, because whenever there was someone around me, which was rare, you want to know about them. Like, why are you out here doing 240 miles too? Like, shouldn't you be at home or something? So just taking the time to talk to people and to savor every little moment, either when I was out on a section or at an aid station, savoring that little moment. I just wanted to spend as much time of that race being grateful for being out there versus pushing myself to just go faster. So to me, it felt very doable in the sense of like the pace that I was going, but the distance, that was the challenge.
Right. Dr. Orton?
Yeah, I don't know. I might go a different direction here. I've been thinking about this, and I wonder what has surprised you the most of the reward that you've gotten from running that you would recommend to your old self or another person who might attach themselves to seeing, hey, I'm just like Callie? What has surprised you the most? Because I saw your finishing photo. That I have to imagine that your point in showing that was the emotion of crossing that finish line was not what you went through for 240 miles. It's what you went through all the way up to the start line. And so what would a person like you 10 years ago need to hear to start on your path?
I think for me, if I were talking to myself, 7 years ago or however long ago, I would tell myself, you're on this floating rock and there are so many beautiful places to explore. But if you want to explore and see them for yourself, this is the motivation to train yourself, to prepare yourself so that one day you can go see something that very few people have seen because you got there on your own 2 feet. I think there's something so just motivating to me, knowing that I got somewhere because my 2 feet got me there versus driving up there. And I don't know if that just like very like primitive feeling of just like getting there and exploring it yourself without anything else, just like, it like fuels me so much.
And so then getting back to Kristen's question, this is coming kind of full circle. Mm-hmm. Based on what you just said there and that experience at Moab, how is that experience different than even doing 100 miles or maybe even 50 miles?
I think, again, that possibility of failure. I've done 50 miles before. I know what that feels like. I've done 100 miles before. I know what that feels like. I've never gone past 135. So I want to know, I was curious to know, what is that like and can I do it? There was so much.
Going that distance, was that a much different feeling than even 130 or 100 miles?
I think it was very,
as far as an experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot that was different. In that, in 100 miles, I don't sleep. Like I get there without napping or whatnot. But there was that extra strategy piece of sleeping a little bit every day so that you can keep going, so you can be more sustainable in that pursuit to get to the finish line. So to me, that was very different than doing the 100 miles, and that you're going way slower. You're actually sleeping, you're actually eating foods like meals. And it's more of this, like, I guess more of like a fast through hike versus a 100-mile run. And so that to me was it felt like a very different experience, a whole different beast than doing a 100-miler where I'm trying to run this whole thing. So those are some of the differences for me.
It's funny, Mika and Eric and I were discussing this earlier this morning, and I was expressing my concerns like, man, I think Callie's going too fast, too far, too soon. And it came to the realization, this is Eric's viewpoint, is that, maybe 240 miles is actually healthier than 26 because
100%. It's like, I could preach that all day long because you're going, and that's something I tell my dad too. And I think he just doesn't understand what a marathon is versus an ultra marathon, like 100 miles. So he's like, in his mind, he's picturing me sprinting through Moab to get to the finish line, where I'm stopping to take a picture of an inchworm on the ground during the 240 miler. And he became my like little motto, my little like poster child for the entire race. But I savored so much more of the slowness in the 240 miles and just like gradually getting there, just step by step, versus a 100-mile or a marathon. I am just hauling ass to that finish line to get there as fast as I can. Definitely raising my heart rate way more. I think at Moab, my heart rate probably went above 100, maybe like 10 times, but I'm just trudging along with my poles.
I think that's the genius of the approach that you and Mika have both taken. And I think for a lot of us, it's alien. I used to call Mika the tourist because we go out on a run together and she'd stop to pet a dog and talk to the neighbor and check the mailbox. I'm like, let's effing go. And I realized, you dial it back and you breathe, your head is up, you're taking in your surroundings, and it is a self-perpetuating cycle because you don't end the run feeling blasted. You feel renewed. You feel there's a little bit left in the tank. Even after 240 miles, there's a little bit left in the tank, which encourages you to go back the next day and start again. We only got a couple of minutes left, so I just want to run down the Callie Mika wisdom that we've learned today. Number one, which is figure out the data, find out what's going inside your blood. Callie, you had a great point about pace yourself so you're going the same at the finish as at the beginning. To me, that is the whole motto of a tourist run. Come through so you're not gasping. Embrace the learning. That the idea is not to just like get to the finish line, but it's what you learn along the way, like what you can learn about this esoteric fruit that they call broccoli. Something alien to my world, but apparently there's a lot to learn about it. And your advice about what you would tell the old Callie, which is that there are paradises out there that are only reachable on your feet. Mika, you want to add a last action wisdom point to our list?
Oh my gosh, the pressure's on here. The way that you spoke about your 240-mile run and taking it at this easy pace, I feel like that's how we should be eating, at this easy pace, not going too fast, going too slow, keeping your eating right in the middle, just like you want to do those super long runs. They should be equal to each other.
I see a Born to Run 3 coming just based on that concept. Yeah. How about you, Callie? Last word. Mika came up big, so now the bar is set very high for last gem of wisdom.
Yeah, this was something I was actually talking to someone last night. They asked me if there was one word that you would tell someone who's going after a huge run like this, or 100-mile, or 50-mile, or someone who's wants to make a big change or a little change or any kind of change, lifestyle change or transformation. What would you tell them? And I said, just believe. Like, it might sound daunting, it might sound terrifying, it might sound impossible, but the first step to getting even to the start line, to the finish line, then is to just believe in yourself and believe that you have exactly what it takes to get what you want, to get to the finish line, to achieve this goal. It might take everything that you have, but you have what it takes. You just have to believe.
I can tell you both, what I most like about both of you, Mika and Callie, is that you bring such a sense of joyfulness and fun. And to me, this is exactly what we want people to associate with running, not pain, misery, denial, discipline, but joy, discovery, and adventure. And so thanks a lot for both of you for joining in and jumping in. But Callie, like I said, since the time I met you, I thought this is what everybody should be, not because of the weight loss, but because of the attitude.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Aloha.
Thank you.
Aloha.